Okay, we're back in the saddle here a little bit. I haven't filmed anything for a couple of months now. I've been working on getting my fly tying area a little bit framed in and some electrical run. So we're going to put just a tiny little dab of super glue here. This is an extra long size 10 hook. And I figured I'd start out with something that would be fairly easy. It's a good beginner fly. It's called the woolly worm, so it's pretty much the same as a woolly bugger, just without the tail. And we'll just start out with some 0.0 or 0.15 lead on the hook. And I'm going to start about halfway down the shank of the hook. And then I'm just going to bring that on up forward towards the eye here. This will help us get this little guy down in the water a little bit faster and ride pretty low in the water, which is what we're looking for. Don't want to crowd the eye, so I want to make sure that I stop about a couple of eye lengths away. And I'll just helicopter pull up and wiggle this back and forth, and the friction on here will just make that break off on us. With that broken off, and because I did use super glue, I can go ahead and take a few more wraps around here with what I've got, the balance of my lead for this particular pattern. Slide it up nice and tight there. I'll probably come in and clip the balance of that off with scissors because I really don't need that much lead. And I'm just going to go ahead and get this thing started with some black Semperfli. Doesn't need to be Semperfli, it can be whatever you want. It's just what I happen to have sitting here on my table next to me. And go ahead and take that back. By pulling your tag end back like this, it just helps a little bit, keeping those thread wraps from not sinking into the coiled up lead that we've got there. Not really important. We're going to be covering all of this up with chenille anyway. I'll take a few passes back and forth just over the top. It's got super glue on it. It's not going to go anywhere. I may take a few extra wraps up here near the front. That just helps me build up sort of that transition, because I'm going to be transitioning back down to the head there. So we're just going to take this right on back one more time. And then I'm going to just reach over and grab my scissors and cut that tag end off. Now we're going to go ahead and transition to our red, and I'm just using some pretty thick red yarn here. Pretty stringy stuff, but this is really just going to have the stubbiest butt end of a tail anyway, so I'm not overly concerned about that being too puffy. I'm just going to go ahead and set this on the top of the shank of the hook here. If I don't want to cut it, I'll just go ahead and kind of start it a little bit back from the eye of the hook here. And all I'm doing here is we're just securing this onto the shaft of the hook here. And the main thing I'm focusing on here as I'm tying this in is grabbing any of those errant fibers, and then just trying to keep this yarn up on the top of the hook shank here till I get back to about where the barb of the hook would be. In this case I'm using a barbless, or I smashed down the barb, so just bring this right on back down here. I'll reach back over and grab my scissors, and I want to just cut this off just barely beyond the bend of that hook here. So again, very short. So we're going to go ahead, this is just a regular size chenille. Sometimes I'll go smaller. This is going to be the body, and I'm going to tie this in right behind where those lead wraps went in. And that'll help us get a little bit more uniformity as that transitions from the shank without the thread or the lead wraps to where we did have the thread wraps on here. And then I'm just going to bring this thread right on back to where I'm going to start wrapping my chenille up towards the eye of the hook. Secure that right about there. That's where my wraps are going to start. I'm going to bring my thread right on back up to behind the eye of the hook. I'm not going to worry about putting a half hitch or anything in here. This chenille is pretty easy to work with. I'm not too worried about losing control of it. So I'm going to just take touching wraps as I move up the shank of the hook here. Try to get that as untwisted as I possibly can. And we're getting right up to right about where I want to tie this off. I don't want to overly crowd the eye of the hook here, so I'm going to take it to about right there. I'm going to take a wrap over the top of that chenille back towards the back end of my hook while my chenille is out here, so all of these straps are going over the top of that chenille, and then I will just go ahead and take a few more wraps right behind the eye. Now I can go ahead and turn with my vise here so I get a good shot at where I want to trim this little guy off. And again, I've got enough material probably to do another fly here. From there, I'm going to grab myself a piece of grizzly hackle. I've already cut the end of it off, so you can kind of see where I've got the thread or the shaft of that feather. I'm just going to kind of hold that about a 45-degree angle, making sure that where I want my first wraps to start are right there at the end of the chenille. Just like that. I'll take a couple of wraps, and then once again I can just turn my vise here a little bit, and we will just sneak right in here and cut off that butt end of that piece of hackle. So this is one of those flies that I never thought you could do this before, and you just have to watch the innovators, because you can do just about anything you want. This is a simple fly, so it's going to sink right into this. You're never going to see it. I'm taking my thread back to the back end of the hook because I'm going to be tying off my hackle back here, and then I'm going to bring my thread right back up to the eye after I've got my hackle done. But I used to think, you can't do that. Depends on which pattern you're tying on whether that's advisable or not. So now that I've got that secured, I got my thread in place, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take at least 2 full turns right up here at the front end of the fly, just to make sure that I've got that covered. And then I'm just going to take loose wraps of this material of our hackle through that chenille and working it towards the back end of the hook here. Yeah, we're getting pretty close. Be careful when you get around the point of the hook, because it only takes one easy little rub against that with your hackle and it'll break it right off, which is not what I want to have happen. So now I can go ahead and capture that hackle back here with the thread that I'd left. Just take a couple of good solid wraps. Sometimes I'll wiggle my thread back and forth as I'm doing this to just try to keep myself from trapping quite so many fibers. And then I'm going to just go ahead and travel my way back up to the front of the hook, again kind of wiggling that thread. And you'll note that there may be a few hackles, feathers that or fibers that get trapped, but not too many, not enough for it to really be noticeable at all. So here we go. I'm going a lot slower than what you would typically need to go. Nearly up here at the top now. And now I'm nice and clean right up behind the eye of the hook, which is what I was looking to have happen. maybe pull some of these stragglers back a little bit, just with my fingers. I may clean it up a little bit with some tweezers here, but for right now I'm just going to go ahead and give myself a little bit of extra thread and we'll whip finish. Won't be good enough for me. Just like that. Turn my vise a little bit sideways so I can have access to that thread. I'm just going to hit it with the other end of my whip finisher, and it'll cut that thread right off for me. While I have it in this position also, I'll just sneak on in and we'll go ahead and trim out the excess hackle here from the very back end of our fly. Like that. And turn this baby back around. I'll clean it up a little bit and we'll be right back. Alright, there you have it. Here's the woolly worm. Like I said before, much like a woolly bugger. The difference is I don't have the marabou tail coming out the back end. Instead, I've got a nice little red hot spot made with that yarn. And just like any woolly bugger, you can change this up just by changing the chenille or the color of hackle that you might be using on it. Probably even change up the thread a little bit, but the yarn on the end. But I do like having that red hot spot back there. It gives it a little bit of attention. But great, easy fly to begin with, to start, practice your techniques. Fun to tie. Give it a shot.